Hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Mirror's political editor, Pippa Crerar, and the Times Home Affairs editor, Matt Dathan. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. Very good to see you. So let's see what's on some of those front pages, which are coming in a little slowly tonight, as perhaps you might imagine, given the drama that took place at about 9 o'clock this evening. The Guardian declares that the Prime Minister is clinging to power after vote humiliation, is how they term it. The Financial Times describes Mr. Johnson as wounded by tonight's result. This is what the Metro says. The party is over Boris. And a very interesting headline on the Telegraph calls it a hollow victory which tears the Tory apart. And the Sun calls it Night of the Blonde Knives. While the Star is unimpressed with the Prime Minister and his allies, their headline, Carry On Pinocchio. And just to remind you that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us analysing and discussing them all. We're joined by Pippa Crerar and Matt Dathan. As I say, Pippa, kick us off. I mean, there's only one big story in town. Of course there is. Let's start with The Guardian. What do they make of it?
Well, unsurprisingly, like all the papers, they're going on Boris Johnson's vote of confidence, which of course he won, but 41% of his MPs voted against him, which really bodes very badly for the next few months and suggests that the Prime Minister is in for a very bumpy time indeed. The Guardian splashes PM clinging to power after vote humiliation.
Would you go that far? Would you say it is a humiliation?
I think it is. I mean, despite the fact that we heard that clip from the Prime Minister in number 10 just less than an hour ago, in which he described it as a good result, that he said it was decisive and that it allowed the party to move on. The reality is that there are still some moments of great peril for the Prime Minister coming up, not least the two by-elections we're expecting on June the 23rd, not least the Commons Privileges Committee inquiry into whether he misled the House over Partygate. And then, of course, the prospect of all of these Tory rebels that have emerged this evening blocking or at least not being helpful in terms of the legislation that the government wants to get through. I mean, he potentially is a lame duck Prime Minister.
And look, Matt, I mean, look at the face, the picture, well, as they say, tells 1,000 words or whatever. The Prime Minister's face, stony face as he's driven away there.
Absolutely, and what was interesting we learned today was that he actually found out just before the pageant yesterday, when we were all enjoying just a few yards away from here, the Jubilee pageant, and he had to sit through hours of that. And again here today, he doesn't look good at all, and I think he tried to put on a brave face, but I think a lot of his critics are calling him delusional tonight by saying he's going to plough on. And as Pippa said, and as The Guardian is saying, he's effectively lost his majority, and that's going to be really crucial when it comes down to really contentious legislation. And we've got 2 more years of the Parliament to go, unless there is a snap election. So it's going to be a rocky road.
OK, let's have a look at your paper, Matt, The Times, and we have here pretty much the same analysis, and I wonder if that's almost the same picture, but even closer up. A wounded victor. I mean, yeah, but how wounded? Terminal?
Well, I mean, he has to be almost fatally wounded, really, when his own allies were going around today saying that anything, they were aiming for below 100. And I mean, even some of the rebels weren't expecting anything more than 130, really, when they were really counting up the numbers. It's 148. Was it 33 or 32 shy of losing power in this building? Yeah. It's incredible.
And it's the percentages people have been looking at as well, comparing particularly to Theresa May, who got 63%, and Boris Johnson got 59%.
Yes, that's right. And in fact, it wasn't just Theresa May who, of course, won that no confidence vote, but then was out of office within 6 months, found it impossible to govern. But going back further, Margaret Thatcher, under a different set of rules at the time, also won a leadership vote, a confidence vote, and ended up stepping down shortly afterwards. And John Major didn't step down immediately afterwards, but was absolutely thrashed in the 1997 general election against Labour and lost power that way. So what I found really interesting this evening is that there are allies of the Prime Minister saying that the precedent that seems to have been set by those 3 previous Conservative leaders in similar situations will not apply to him because, of course,
because he's Boris Johnson.
Because he's Boris Johnson, and apparently the usual rules don't apply to Boris Johnson. He defies the laws of political gravity. Whether that turns out to be the case here, his allies don't think it is, or at least they don't hope it is. We're going to have to wait and see.
But Matt, what about the laws of the Conservative Party and the 1922 committee, which are, if he's won this vote, technically he can't face a challenge again for another year. But as people were saying, of course, that applied to Theresa May, but look what happened to her.
I think it's irrelevant really what the rules are right now. I think come the end of June, and it seems quite a long way away now, but in the 23rd of June, facing 2 key by-elections, we saw a poll yesterday showing Wakefield's they're on course to lose by about 20 points to Labour, and Tiverton and Honiton and Devon, 24,000 majority. If they were to lose that to Lib Dems, which the bookmakers are saying they will, I think there is nothing stopping the 22. If 150 Tory MPs are coming to them and saying, look, we really need another vote, I think the rules are irrelevant.
So, I mean, Pippa, those by-elections, if he hangs on till then, say Wakefield's gone, what happens if they hold the other one? Could that shore him up?
It could a bit. I mean, the reality is that these are both symbolic in different ways. Wakefield, of course, was a seat which was won by the Tories for the first time in many decades at the 2019 general election, in the so-called red wall of seats across the Midlands and the North that fell for, well, the Labour lost and the Tories won at that election. And Boris Johnson was credited with that. And the result in Wakefield is certain to really put the jitters on a lot of red wall Tory MPs, a majority of whom some Boris Johnson allies believe tonight actually voted against him in that contest that we saw earlier today. So you'll have the jitters going on amongst the red wall MPs, but then also the so-called blue wall. I mean, it's all colours these days, but the more traditional Conservative seats across the south and the southeast. Tiverton and Honiton, obviously in Devon, one of those seats that could potentially fall to the Lib Dems. Lots of longer-standing Conservative MPs starting to talk about how they're hearing from their constituents. They don't like the sort of lack of probity that they're seeing in this building. The Partygate scandal exemplified that.
Partygate here. We have a bit of a soundtrack, don't we? The Bay City Rollers rewritten protesters at the gates of Downing Street. Let's have a look at the Telegraph. All important, of course, for the Tory supporters and the Tory constituency. And this is brutal, isn't it, Matt? Hollow victory tears Tories apart. Does that mean they think that it's going to be a leadership contest, and that really will be presumably hard fought?
Well, I think when the Conservative Prime Minister is starting to lose the Telegraph, especially Boris Johnson, that's his paper, it's where he worked for years. Yeah. I think that's going to really hurt him. And I think maybe over the coming days, maybe we might see a change in tone from the Prime Minister. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone next week. But what I found also interesting tonight was the Spectator magazine, the Tory leading magazine, say their headlines this evening were he might have won the vote, but he lost the party. He's lost the party. So 2 really key Conservative publications really not giving him very good headlines.
Yeah, do you go along with that, Peter?
Yeah, absolutely. And the Conservative MPs that started to come out in their dozens today to publicly denounce the Prime Minister and say that they wanted him gone is a worry for the Prime Minister, because those voices get heard. I mean, there's some high-profile ones. There was Jeremy Hunt, of course, who's been sort of sitting on the fence so far, saying that he didn't think it was the right time because of the Ukraine crisis to hold a leadership contest. However, made it quite clear today, was one of the first at the traps, in fact, to suggest that he was going to vote against the Prime Minister. He's tipped as a future leadership contender. They're all going to be jostling for position. And I think Matt's right in that the Prime Minister, if he's going to shore up his position, he's going to have to slightly change the tone and stop suggesting that anybody that is concerned about probity in number 10 is obsessed by and focusing on the wrong things, the issues that don't matter. Start realising that, of course, issues that matter to people at the moment are cost of living crisis, things like housing. We're going to see some speeches from him in the coming days, one with Rishi Sunak concentrating on the economy. They're going to have to try and shore up that support, persuade many of their Tory MPs who don't currently think that the government is actually focused, they think that it's drifting and it's lacking direction, and also behind the scenes convince those Tory MPs that actually did support him this time that they need to continue to do so, because the danger, of course, is that there's another contest and some of those that backed him this time will change their minds.
Right, I'm going to give you the Daily Mirror, because Pippa would obviously say it was great, and let's just have a look at the front page on Pippa's paper. Hard to say. Party's over, Boris, and again, you know, an endless number of photographs to accompany these stories.
Yeah, photographers must have had a field day. But I'm going to embarrass Pippa by pointing out Pippa is partly responsible for this day, really, with Paul Brown from ITV breaking all the Partygate scoops, and that's a headline, that's a front page I'm sure will go up in the wall. But I think I guess it would be expected that the Daily Mirror would be going with that headline. But I think going back to the Tory headlines, the papers, I think once Boris Johnson wakes up tomorrow and it starts to sink in, I think there has to be a change of tone, because today we saw so many threats from the whips going around saying we're going to be broken financially in your constituency. Even Jacob Rees-Mogg apparently saying there could be a snap election, and Boris Johnson pointedly not ruling that out. One of his aides told me tonight that he might be threatening a general election, a snap election, but there's no way he's going to do that. I mean,
well, he did rule that out, actually, when our Ali Fortescue talked to him. But, I mean, a snap election, Pippa, remember looking at the polling, his own seat is under threat.
Yes, and that's actually a calculation that many Tory MPs were making tonight. Do they think that a Tory government under anyone but Boris Johnson would stand a better chance of winning the next election than a Tory government under Boris Johnson? All the polls suggest if there's an election tomorrow, the Tories would lose it. But Boris Johnson has got this long tradition of defying the laws of political gravity, and they hope tonight that he will be able to bounce back, they'll be able to shore up his support, they'll be able to set a direction for the government. And of course, as we all know, he's a formidable campaigner, and actually he still is their best chance, albeit with all those caveats, of leading them to victory at the next election.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview right here on Sky News. With me now, Pippa Crerar and Matt Dathan, and we are diving into the papers, all reacting to the drama of today, the vote of confidence in Boris Johnson. Let's have a look at the Metro, first of all, in this section. There we go. And, of course, Boris Johnson has survived, but a large proportion of his MPs voted against him. Not enough, of course, to dislodge him right now, but even so, the papers are discussing possible rivals. The Jeremy Hunt is on to get it. Identify Tory challengers. Right, Pippa, possible rivals, two of them pictured there. Penny Mordaunt and Ben Wallace. So are they two of the front runners?
Ben Wallace is always, or over the last couple of months, has topped all the polls of Conservative Party members who, of course, have the final say in the contest. The MPs whittle it down to two candidates, and those two candidates then go on a tour of hustings around the country, and it's up to the members to decide. So Ben Wallace and Liz Truss have kind of been in the top two on and off for the last few months. Penny Mordaunt seen as sort of the dark horse candidate. And it was interesting today when she was asked whether she supported Boris Johnson. She refused to say one way or the other. She is, of course, a serving minister, so you would expect her to back the Prime Minister. But for a long time, she's been talked about as a potential fresh face. She's a Brexiteer. She's kind of regarded as presentable to the country. She might be somebody that could inject a bit of, novelty, if you like,
well, there's
in
some
number
resignation
10.
Fears about her in number 10, that she might walk.
And with the rumour going around to Westminster tonight, just across the road, is that there will be resignations from government ministers tomorrow. So we've got that to look out for as well. Whether she's amongst them or not, I don't know. But yes, you'll see what happens tomorrow.
OK, Matt, runners and riders, so we had two of them there. Who else would you pick out? They had Jeremy Hunt in their sub-headline there as well.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy Hunt seems to be the front runner with the bookmakers, and interestingly, Penny Mordaunt, it was a dark horse just a few days ago, but she's now second favourite with the bookmakers, and Liz Truss is the clear candidate from the cabinet, I think, and Rishi Sunak hasn't ruled. Well, he's saying allies.
Is he fatally damaged, or do you think?
I don't think so, no. And if you look at the resignations today, well, not the resignations, the letters, a lot of former Treasury ministers who worked alongside him, Jesse Norman, he came out with incredibly stinging criticism, and I don't think he would have done that without talking to Rishi Sunak. I mean, I don't know that, but and then back to Penny Mordaunt, people think that Andrea Leadsom was possibly the stalking horse last week and would maybe run her leadership campaign, possibly being the chancellor that she's always wanted to be.
They really are jockeying for position then. I mean, there could be, potentially dozens
Well-
of contenders. Well, why does he only need 8 MPs to be nominated? That was the
Yeah.
case last time round,
I mean, I
wasn't
think last time there was 10 that ended up going for it first time, and this time I think we probably see similar numbers. What's interesting about this time, though, is that Boris Johnson was the clear favourite to win from the beginning, and of course won. This time, all bets are off, really, and yes, of course, the bookies have their favourites, and the party members have their favourites, and the MPs, of course, have their favourites. But it's an unknown, it's all to play for, so I imagine there'll be quite a few people, the next generation perhaps, people like Tom Tugendhat, throwing their hat in the ring and thinking, now's the moment.
OK, we'll squeeze another paper in. Let's see what we've, as I say, they're just coming in as we speak. It is The Sun. Matt, Night of the Blonde Knives. A political reference there as well to the Night of the Long Knives. Please explain.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's another classic tabloid headline, isn't it? Harking back to the 1980s. But we had, when Boris Johnson came in as Prime Minister, he axed, I think, 11 cabinet ministers, and I think we had very similar headlines then. When I'm not sure. It takes a few looks at that to try and work out exactly what they're going for, I think. But
And let's have a quick look at the Star. And perhaps echoing what the protesters at the end of Downing Street are saying. Yes, carry on, Pinocchio. So Pippa, I mean, reference there to carry on, and of course Boris Johnson's reputation amongst some people, including those protesters, for perhaps not being entirely accurate with the truth.
The Star have not been shy in coming forward when it comes to criticising the Prime Minister throughout. They've had a field day with the Partygate row and the Prime Minister, and have frequently referred to him as Pinocchio. Of course, that gets to the nub of what many Conservative MPs are worried about. He is, of course, being investigated by the Commons Privileges Committee about whether he misled Parliament over Partygate. That might usually be considered a resigning offence. Let's see.
And Matt, carry on. I mean,
Yeah.
he wants to, doesn't he? I mean, that is for sure, even if, ministers resign or cabinet ministers come and tell him to go.
yeah, and that was his message after the vote, despite losing 148 of his MPs. He said, we're carrying on, we've got important business to do in terms of the cost of living crisis, Northern Ireland Protocol, etc., and the housing announcement he's due to make later this week. And I think that housing announcement will be key for him because it's a Thatcher policy.